What happens when Hollywood royalty walks onto a late-night set expecting the red carpet treatment, but gets a reality check instead? In just 33 seconds, one comment would turn a simple interview into the most explosive television moment of the year. Greg Gutfeld sat behind his desk that evening, ready for what he thought would be a standard celebrity interview. The studio lights were bright, the audience was excited, and his guest was about to make an entrance that nobody would forget, but not for the reasons she hoped. Meghan Markle walked onto the set, with confidence radiating from every step. The audience clapped politely as she made her way to the guest chair, settling in with a smile that seemed just a little too practiced, a little too perfect. "Welcome to the show," Greg said, his tone friendly but professional. "Thanks for joining us tonight." "Well, thank you for having me," Meghan replied, her voice carrying that careful polish that comes from years of media training. "Though I have to say, I was surprised you even knew who I was." The audience laughed nervously. Greg's eyebrow raised slightly, but he kept his composure. "I think most of America knows who you are at this point." "Most of the world, actually," Meghan corrected, her smile never wavering. "But I suppose your audience might be a bit more, shall we say, limited in their perspective." Greg leaned back in his chair, clearly not expecting the interview to take this turn so quickly. "Well, we do have millions of viewers every night, so I would say our perspective is pretty broad." "Millions," Meghan repeated, as if the word itself was quaint. "That is sweet. I think my last social media post reached more people than your entire weekly viewership." The audience went quiet. You could feel the tension building in the studio, like a storm cloud gathering overhead. Greg's producer probably had their head in their hands at this point, but Greg himself remained calm, almost amused. "You know what?" Greg said, his voice steady. "I actually wanted to talk about your charity work tonight. I heard you have been involved in some interesting projects." "Charity work," Meghan said with a slight laugh. "Yes, I do try to give back when I can. Unlike some people who just sit behind a desk and talk about the world without actually doing anything to change it." Greg nodded slowly. "So, hosting a show where we discuss important issues and give people different perspectives, that counts as doing nothing?" "I mean, talking about problems is easy," Meghan said, waving her hand dismissively. "Actually solving them, actually making a difference in people's lives, that takes real work. That takes sacrifice. That takes leaving behind a comfortable life and stepping into the unknown." "Right," Greg said, "and you have certainly left behind a comfortable life." "Exactly," Meghan said, missing the subtle edge in his voice entirely. "Not everyone has the courage to walk away from institutions that refuse to evolve, that cling to outdated traditions, and, quite frankly, outdated thinking." "Interesting," Greg replied. "So you see yourself as someone who has sacrificed a lot." "I do not see myself that way," Meghan said sharply. "I am that way. I gave up everything. My career, my freedom, my privacy. All for love. And then, when that was not enough, I had to give up even more just to protect my family and my peace." Greg folded his hands on his desk. "Let me ask you something. When you say you gave up your career, you mean your acting career, right? The one where you had a supporting role on a cable show?" The audience made a collective sound, somewhere between a gasp and an "oh." Meghan's smile flickered for just a moment. "It was not just a cable show," she said, her voice tighter now. "It was a successful series with a devoted following." "Sure," Greg said. "I am not trying to diminish that. I am just trying to understand the sacrifice. Because from where I sit, it seems like you traded a supporting role for becoming one of the most famous women in the world. That does not sound like much of a sacrifice to me." "You would not understand," Meghan said, her composure starting to crack. "You could not possibly understand what it is like to have every single thing you do scrutinized, criticized, twisted by the media." Greg let out a short laugh. "I host a political commentary show. Trust me, I understand criticism." It is not the same, Meghan insisted. The level of hate, the level of vitriol directed at me, it is unlike anything anyone else has experienced. Anyone? Greg asked. That is a pretty big claim. Yes, anyone, Meghan doubled down. The attacks on me have been relentless, coordinated, and often rooted in prejudice that people like you probably do not even recognize. People like me, Greg repeated slowly. What exactly does that mean? It means people who have never had to face real adversity, Meghan said, her words coming faster now. People who have had every advantage, every privilege, and then sit in judgment of those of us who have actually struggled. The audience was completely silent now. Greg's face remained neutral, but you could see he was choosing his next words carefully. So, let me get this straight, he said. You are saying that I, someone who built a career from the ground up, who worked for years in relative obscurity before getting this show, have never faced adversity? And you, who married into one of the wealthiest and most powerful families on earth, you are the one who has struggled? You are twisting my words, Meghan said. I am using your words, Greg countered. You just said that people like me do not understand struggle. I'm trying to understand what you mean by that. Meghan shifted in her chair, clearly uncomfortable now. What I mean is that there are different types of struggle, and some struggles are more visible, more damaging, more traumatic than others. I agree with that, Greg said. But what I do not agree with is the idea that your struggle is somehow more valid or more important than anyone else's. Everyone has challenges. Everyone faces difficulties. The difference is, most people do not go on international television to complain about how hard their life is while living in a mansion. How dare you, Meghan said, her voice rising. You have no idea what I have been through. You have no idea what it is like to be hunted by photographers, to have lies written about you every single day, to fear for your safety and your child's safety. You are right. I do not know what that is like, Greg said calmly. But I do know what it is like to be attacked for my views, to receive threats, to be called every name in the book because I dare to have opinions that some people disagree with. And the difference between you and me is that I do not expect sympathy for it. I signed up for this. Just like you signed up for your life. I did not sign up to be treated like a second-class citizen, Meghan shot back. I did not sign up to be ignored, silenced, and pushed aside. But you did sign up to marry into a royal family, Greg said. A family with rules, traditions, and protocols that have existed for centuries. You had to know what you were getting into. So I am supposed to just accept being mistreated because of tradition? Meghan asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. I am supposed to smile and stay quiet while people make my life miserable? No, Greg said. But you are also not supposed to act like you are the first person in history to have a difficult mother-in-law or to deal with family drama. Royal or not, those are pretty universal experiences. The audience laughed at that, and you could see Meghan's face flush with anger. This is exactly what I am talking about, she said. This dismissive attitude, this refusal to take my experiences seriously. You are proving my point right now. I am not dismissing your experiences, Greg said. I am putting them in perspective. You want everyone to see you as this tragic figure, this victim of circumstance. But the reality is, you have more power, more privilege, more opportunity than 99% of the people watching this show right now. And instead of using that platform to actually do something positive, you spend your time complaining about how unfair your life has been. I do plenty of positive things, Meghan said defensively. I use my platform to speak out about important issues. I advocate for those who do not have a voice. Do you, though? Greg asked. Or do you use important issues as a way to keep yourself relevant and in the headlines? Because from where I sit, it seems like every cause you champion somehow circles back to you and your story. That is completely unfair, Meghan said, her voice shaking slightly now. I care deeply about the causes I support. just because I also share my own story does not mean I am making it all about me. Does it not? Greg pressed. When was the last time you promoted a charity or a cause without also talking about how it relates to your personal trauma or your personal journey? Meghan opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. She looked flustered, caught off guard by the directness of the question. That is what I thought, Greg said, not unkindly but firmly. Look, I am not saying you are a bad person. I am not even saying you have not faced real challenges. But what I am saying is that you need to stop acting like you are the only person who has ever suffered. And you need to stop expecting everyone to treat you like royalty while simultaneously complaining about being treated like royalty. I never asked to be treated like royalty, Meghan said, her voice rising again. I asked to be treated like a human being. Is that too much to ask? Of course not, Greg said. But here's the thing. Being treated like a human being means being held accountable like a human being. It means people get to disagree with you. It means people get to criticize you when they think you are wrong. It means you do not get to hide behind victimhood every time someone questions your choices or your behavior. I am not hiding behind anything, Meghan insisted. I am standing up for myself. I am refusing to be silenced. You are one of the least silenced people on the planet, Greg said with a slight laugh. You have done multiple interviews, a documentary series, a podcast. You wrote a book. You have had more opportunities to share your story than most people could ever dream of. So please, stop acting like you are being silenced. Meghan stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I do not have to sit here and listen to this. Actually, you kind of do, Greg said, still seated calmly. You agreed to come on this show. You knew what kind of show this is. If you only wanted softball questions and people telling you how brave and amazing you are, you should have stuck to friendly media outlets. This is hostile, Meghan said, pointing at Greg. This is exactly the kind of treatment I have been talking about. You are being deliberately antagonistic. I am being honest, Greg corrected. There is a difference. I am asking you real questions and pointing out contradictions in your narrative. That is not hostility. That is journalism. Journalism? Meghan scoffed. Is that what you call this? Ambushing a guest and attacking them? I have not attacked you once, Greg said, his patience clearly wearing thin now. I have challenged you. I have questioned you. But I have not insulted you. I have not called you names. I have not done anything except ask you to defend the things you have said publicly. If you consider that an attack, then maybe the problem is not with me. The problem is definitely with you, Meghan said, her voice loud enough now that the audience shifted, uncomfortably. You and people like you who think you can treat people however you want, as long as you call it honesty or journalism or free speech. Well, I have had enough. I am done. Then leave, Greg said simply. Nobody is forcing you to stay. Meghan stared at him for a long moment, her face a mixture of anger and disbelief. You are actually going to let me walk out of here? I am not going to beg you to stay if you do not want to be here, Greg said. This is your choice. Stay and have an actual conversation like an adult, or leave and prove every point I just made about you. The studio was so quiet you could hear the cameras humming. Meghan looked around, perhaps expecting someone to jump in and defend her, to stop this from happening. But nobody moved. The audience watched in stunned silence. You know what? Meghan said, grabbing her purse from beside the chair. I came here tonight thinking I could have a real conversation. I thought maybe, just maybe, I could reach across the divide and connect with people who see the world differently than I do. But clearly, that was naive of me. It was not naive, Greg said. It was strategic. You thought you could come here, share your talking points, and win over a new audience. But you did not count on actually being challenged. You did not count on someone not buying into the narrative you have been selling. I am not selling anything, Meghan said, her voice breaking slightly. I am just trying to live my life and tell my truth. Your truth, Greg repeated. See, that is the problem right there. There is not your truth and my truth. There is just the truth. And the truth is that you have been given more chances, more platforms, more grace than most people get in 10 lifetimes. And somehow, it is still not enough. Somehow, you are still the victim. I am a victim, Meghan said, tears forming in her eyes now. I have been victimized by the media, by institutions, by people who refuse to see me as anything other than an outsider. Or maybe, Greg said softly, you have been given exactly what you wanted. Fame, attention, relevance. And now that you have it, you are realizing that it comes with a price. And that price is that not everyone is going to like you. Not everyone is going to agree with you. Not everyone is going to think you are as special as you think you are. Meghan wiped at her eyes, smudging her mascara slightly. I never said I was special. You did not have to, Greg said. Your entire demeanor, everything about how you carry yourself, screams that you think you are above everyone else. And maybe in your world, surrounded by people who tell you how amazing you are all day long, you can maintain that delusion. But out here, in the real world, people see through it. I am done with this, Meghan said, her voice firm despite the tears. I am done with you. I am done with this show. And I am done trying to reason with people who have already made up their minds about me. Fair enough, Greg said, standing up now. But before you go, let me say one more thing. You came on this show tonight, and within minutes, you insulted me, insulted my audience, and made it clear that you think you are better than everyone in this room. And when I called you out on it, you played the victim card. Again. You have been doing this for years now, and honestly, it is getting old. How dare you speak to me this way, Meghan said, her voice shaking with rage now. Do you know who I am? And there it was. The question that revealed everything. Greg smiled, a sad, knowing smile. Yes, he said quietly. I know exactly who you are. You are someone who traded a small amount of fame for a large amount of fame, and now you are upset that the large amount of fame comes with scrutiny. You are someone who wanted the fairy tale, but was not willing to do the work that fairy tales require. You are someone who speaks about compassion and kindness, but shows very little of it to anyone who disagrees with you. That is who you are. Meghan's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. She looked around the studio one more time, as if searching for an ally, for someone to validate her outrage. But there was only silence. I think you should leave now, Greg said, not unkindly. This clearly is not working out. You are kicking me off? Meghan asked, her voice incredulous. You were already leaving, Greg pointed out. I'm just making it official. This interview is over. Meghan stood there for another moment, her chest heaving with emotion, her carefully constructed image crumbling in real time. Then, without another word, she turned and walked toward the exit, her heels clicking loudly against the studio floor. The audience watched her go, nobody quite sure if they should clap or stay silent. They stayed silent. Greg returned to his desk, straightening his papers as if nothing particularly unusual had just happened. Well, he said to the camera, his tone light despite everything that had just occurred. That was unexpected. We will be right back after this break. But they did not go to break immediately. The camera stayed on Greg for just a few seconds longer, and in those seconds, you could see the weight of what had just happened settling over him. He had not wanted that confrontation. He had not set out to make a guest storm off his show, but he had also not been willing to sit there and let someone insult him, his audience, and his profession without pushing back. The camera finally cut away, and somewhere backstage, Meghan was probably already on the phone with her publicist, spinning the story, crafting the narrative of how she had been ambushed, attacked, mistreated. That is what she does. That is what she has always done. But for those of us who watched it happen in real time, who saw the entire exchange without editing or manipulation, the truth was clear. This was not an ambush. This was not an attack. This was simply what happens when someone who is used to being agreed with finally meets someone who is willing to disagree. And she could not handle it. Greg did not chase after her. He did not apologize. He did not try to smooth things over or make it seem like less than it was. He simply let her leave and moved on with his show, because that is what professionals do. They do not let one difficult guest derail everything. The rest of the show went on as planned, though you could feel the energy in the room had shifted. The audience was buzzing with the tension of what they had witnessed. Social media was already exploding with clips and commentary. Everyone had an opinion, and those opinions were as divided as you would expect. Some people praised Greg for standing his ground, for not allowing himself to be lectured and insulted on his own show. They saw him as someone who refused to bow to celebrity entitlement, who treated Meghan the same way he would treat any guest who came on with an attitude. Others, of course, saw it differently. They saw a powerful man attacking a vulnerable woman. They saw racism, sexism, and cruelty disguised as honesty. They saw Greg as a bully who went after Meghan because he knew it would get ratings. But here's the thing about truth. It does not change based on perspective. What happened on that stage happened. The words that were spoken were spoken. Meghan walked onto that set with an attitude of superiority, and Greg simply refused to accept it. That is not bullying. That is not attacking. That is standing up for yourself. Throughout the entire exchange, Greg never raised his voice. He never insulted her personally. He asked questions and challenged assertions, doing what any good interviewer should do when faced with a guest more interested in controlling the narrative. Meghan, for all her talk about being silenced and ignored, could not handle even the gentlest pushback. She expected deference, reverence, sympathy, and when she did not get it, she fell apart. Greg did not need to kick Meghan off his show. She was already halfway out the door from the moment the interview started going in a direction she could not control. All he did was acknowledge reality. Meghan wanted to be seen as brave for walking away. She wanted people to rally around her. But what most people saw was someone who could not handle a challenging conversation. Someone who crumbled the moment things got uncomfortable. Greg did not gloat. He simply moved forward, proving the moment would not define him or his show. Greg knows who he is. He does not need constant validation or sympathy. He just shows up, does his job, and lets the chips fall where they may. Meghan seems to need the world to constantly affirm her victimhood, her struggle, her special status. And when someone dares to question the narrative, she cannot cope. She had walked onto that stage expecting to be treated like royalty, and she left having been treated like everyone else. For someone like her, that might have been the greatest insult of all. The interview that was supposed to last 30 minutes ended in less than 15. The appearance that was meant to soften her image only reinforced every criticism that had been made about her. Greg just sat there, doing his job, asking his questions, refusing to pretend that uncomfortable truths do not exist. He simply refused to participate in a narrative that did not match reality. That is what made Meghan so angry. Not that he was mean or cruel, but that he was honest. Greg gave Meghan every opportunity to have a real conversation. He did not ambush her with gotcha questions. He simply pointed out the contradictions between what she says and what she does. And that was too much. So she left. And in leaving, she proved every point Greg had made about her. That she expects special treatment. That she cannot handle criticism. That she sees herself as above everyone else. Meghan had a real opportunity that night. She had a chance to prove that she could handle tough conversations with grace and humor. She could have engaged with the harder questions, shown some humility and self-awareness. Instead, she got defensive, played the victim, and ran away when things got uncomfortable. She gave everyone who had ever criticized her exactly the ammunition they needed. Greg ended up with one of the most talked about moments in late-night television. Not because he tried to create drama, but because he refused to pretend that drama was not